What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another video. Do you own a leopard gecko and want to improve the care that you give your leopard gecko? Or are you just looking into getting a leopard gecko? Doesn't matter either way, because this is the video for you. In today's video, we're going to be deep diving into the care of leopard geckos and anything they could possibly need, how to care for them, deep dive into their care. So let's roll the intro so we can get this video started. And if there's anything specific you guys want to see, check the time codes down in the description and you will be able to find it. So without any further ado, let's roll that intro and get this video started. Alright guys, so the first thing we're going to get into is the size of the gecko. How big do they get? First off, we're going to start with hatchlings or babies. So babies will generally start off around the 3 to 4 inch mark, while adults are generally in the range of 7 to 10 inches. Now, there are some species of giant leopard gecko that will actually get bigger than that 10 inches. So if you find out that you have a massive one, you might have a giant leopard gecko, but most of them stay between 7 to 10 inches long. The next thing we're going to talk about is their lifespan. How long do they live for? So basically, I would expect for you guys to expect that you are going to have your leopard gecko from anywhere from 6 to 10 years. But some people, and I would say probably most people, have them live generally 10 to 20 years. So I would be looking more around the 10-ish year mark on average. Some of them live longer, but you'll probably get around 10-ish years from your leopard gecko at least. Alright guys, so the next thing we're going to talk about, which is very important, is the tank size and the tank setup. So basically, I think this is one of the easier parts of leopard gecko keeping. Honestly, I would say that there's a rule that I didn't really make it up because a lot of people do this, but I just call it the 20-40 rule. So basically, when leopard geckos are babies, I would put them in a 20-gallon long tank. As long as you have it set up properly, that should be perfect for them to grow out in. And then once they get bigger, you can move them to a 40-gallon tank. So for babies, up until they get closer to adult size, I would say a 20-gallon long tank works perfectly, as long as you have a metal or mesh lid that can hold your lighting, which we'll talk about lighting and heat in a little bit. Then I think that a 20-gallon will be sufficient for a baby or juvenile growing up to adulthood. And then I think a 40-gallon tank for adults is perfect. It gives them room to roam, and it gives you enough space. Having the 20 and 40-gallon gives you the ability to give them that temperature gradient that they need. Alright guys, so next we're going to be talking about how you actually set up their tank and some of the supplies that you'll need for their tank at a bare minimum. Now you can always get even more decorations and things like that, but I'm just talking about the bare bones, basically essentials that you need to care for your leopard gecko. So basically you're going to need 3 hides, or if you have a lay/dig box, you can get away with 2 hides and then that lay/dig box. You are also going to need your food and water dishes, and then a little small dish like a water bottle cap would even work for calcium or multivitamins, whatever you're giving to your gecko that you want to leave in their tank full time. So that way, if they need it, they have access to it. You are also going to need whatever lighting or heat option that you're going to have, but we're going to talk about that soon. So I'm not going to say any specific one because you might have one and not the other. So we'll talk about that in a minute. All right, guys, now I'm going to actually go in depth and show you guys how exactly to set up a leopard gecko tank, or an example of how you could set it up. That way you guys understand what I mean when I say all the different things that I mean about temperature and humidity and the heat gradient and all the things like that. What I'm going to do is basically the same thing for adults and babies, other than the lay or the dig box, because babies don't get one. If you have any loose substrate with the babies, it can cause impaction and you don't want that. So what I would do is have a hot side and a cool side. Don't worry, we're going to be talking about exact temperature, lighting, humidity very soon. But the hot side in this case is going to be on the left with the warm hide, and then on the right side, that's where you're going to put the cool hide, and then towards the middle or a little bit towards the warmer spot is where you want to put the humid hide/dig box or lay box. That is because your humid hide needs heat to stay humid. If you just put on the cool side, it's just going to be wet. It's not going to be actually humid, and they need that humidity to help them shed, or if they're going to be laying eggs, or sometimes they just like to be in there. Then what I'll do is I'll add a food and water dish to the cool side or the middle of the tank. I would also offer a calcium dish. Like I told you guys, a water bottle cap works perfect. Have that be located near the food dish. That way, when they need it, they can get whatever nutrients or the calcium that they need whenever they feel like they need it. I still offer them dusted bugs with that on it, but I still leave it in their tank. That way they can have it, like I said, if they need it. And like I said, if you're using the humid hide or the dig box, you don't need your third humid hide, because that essentially acts as the same exact thing. So you'd only need the 2 hides and then the dig box or the lay box / humid hide. But either way, that goes right in the middle or a little bit closer to the warm side. That way it can stay nice and humid for them. Now for the dig or lay box, what I use, and like I said, this is for adults only, but I use a mix of sphagnum moss and coconut coir, and that seems to work very well at holding the humidity and keeping it moist but not soaking wet. Now I also don't soak it, I just make sure that it stays nice and damp and a little bit humid in there, because that's how, like I said, they will help to get their stuck sheds or just their normal sheds off. They'll go in there where it's nice and humid, be able to pull it off, eat it, and then move on. So definitely I would recommend providing that to adults. Even if you have a male, it works the same exact way. Yeah, they might not lay eggs, but they are going to use it as a humid hide or a digging box, and a lot of leopard geckos love to dig, so I'd highly recommend one of those. So here's the part that a lot of people are probably tuned in to see, and that is the lighting, the temperatures, and the UVB, or if you need it or if you don't need it. So the first thing we're going to talk about is what sort of heat source that you can use. So in my opinion, the best way you can go is an under tank heater with a thermostat attached to it. That way you can control the exact temperature and it's never going to overheat or burn your gecko. There's no possibility if you have a thermostat. I would highly recommend it. Another option for heating is using a ceramic heat emitter. Now this won't give off any light, but it will give off heat constantly. That way you can use it at night to make sure your leopard gecko stays warm. Another thing you could do is a heat lamp and an under tank heater. Actually, that is what I do currently, and then at nighttime I flip off the heat lamp and turn on a ceramic heat emitter on the top, so that way there's heat coming down from the top and there's heat radiating from the bottom. That way my leopard gecko knows that it can always go up or down depending on where it wants to be for heat. It's not too hot. I keep it around 90 degrees, which we'll talk about temperature in a minute, but I generally keep that area around 90 degrees, one consistent spot of 90, and then the air around there is the upper 80s, which, like I said, we'll talk about that soon. So for lighting, a leopard gecko is similar to a lot of other reptiles, meaning they need a 12 and 12 cycle, 12-hour days and 12-hour nights. The best way to do this is either with an LED light, or like I said, if you do my setup my way, I've got my timer on a light. That way, as soon as it becomes time, the light shut off, but the ceramic heat emitter kicks on. That way I'm not losing that heat source from the top. I still have one on the bottom, so I've got a bottom and top, but some people will just do a ceramic heat emitter all the time. But if you do that, you won't have that 12 and 12 day-night cycle. So what you could do is use natural, like window lighting. Like if you have a shade, just leave it open every single day and night. If they're in a room that, you know, it's not your bedroom or whatever, you could do something like that where they're getting the natural light from the window and that day-night cycle is still present. They're getting light in the day and they're getting darkness at nighttime. Now, if you're in a bedroom, sometimes it can be hard to do 12 and 12 because you'll be having your lights on. So adjust it accordingly. It doesn't have to be always night and day outside as long as they're not really seeing outdoor light. You would just adjust it 12-hour days, 12-hour nights. Now, as far as UVB goes, leopard geckos don't need UVB. Now, there is studies that show that UVB is beneficial in a lot of reptiles. Now, do your own research on that. Whether or not you want to provide that for your gecko is totally up to you, but definitely do more research. I'm not going to persuade you either way. I'm just going to give you guys the facts and then let you guys figure out how you want to go about doing it. Alright guys, now we're going to talk about temperatures. Like I was saying, on the warm side, you want a general warm side area in the 80s. You want a general warm hot spot, or like a, not really a basking spot because they don't bask too much, but they will try to get warm. So basically you want that one spot to be anywhere from, I would say, 90 to 93 degrees. I generally I have mine set for 92 degrees, and it's normally 90 or 91 degrees in that one spot. The general area on the warmer side is in the 80s, and then on the cool side you should be looking for 71 to 75, 73 degrees being the perfect temperature. I would say 73, 74, somewhere in there, just for the general cool side of the tank. Now obviously the middle of the tank is going to be a mixture of those two. It's going to be right in the middle probably. So then if you have that, it should be perfect for your leopard gecko. Alright guys, the next thing we're going to talk about is leopard gecko substrate. So you've basically got two options here. you can go the, I would say, easier way, and that's not as beautiful, but I mean, sometimes that works better for people, and that would be paper towels. Now, paper towels are pretty easy. I mean, you literally just put it down. I would change it out once a week and do spot cleanings in between there. If you're noticing poops, just pull them out and throw them away. But I would probably replace the paper towel once a week, give or take. I mean, it just kind of depends on how big your tank is and what it looks like. That is one way. It doesn't look as pretty, and there's another thing that you're going to want to do. Like I said before, add a lay or dig box, a humid hide type of a thing that they can go into and dig, because they love digging. And if you're going to provide paper towel as a substrate, you can't dig through paper towel unless you're just ripping it, and that's not really digging. So I would highly suggest, if you're going to do that, provide them a bigger than normal dig box, lay box, humid hide, whatever you want to call it, something with coconut coir and sphagnum moss in there that's damp. That way you can provide them with something that they would naturally do, which is dig. They love digging. I highly recommend doing that, especially if you're going to do not super realistic setup. I would definitely recommend that if you're using paper towels as a substrate. Now, your other substrate option is actually doing what I've been saying you could do for the dig or lay box, and that's using sphagnum moss and coconut coir on the bottom of their tank and use that as a substrate. Now, like I said before, don't ever do this for babies because they can become impacted, and just don't do it. It's adults only, but you can definitely do that for adults. I would highly recommend that. I think it looks awesome. You're probably going to spot clean every single time you see poop, but then you're probably going to, I would say, somewhat replace, if it's not bioactive, the entire substrate probably every 3 months, as long as you're spot cleaning and staying up on the cleaning and it's not looking bad or smelling bad. I would say probably every 1 to 3 months you would do that. Now, if it's bioactive, you just spot clean, you have your cleanup crew do the rest, and you really don't have to replace it other than if you're redoing it. The only thing you would have to do if you're trying to make it bioactive is add a drainage layer on the very bottom, then a screen, and then your substrate. Another quick note, I would definitely not use sand. I mean, it's controversial on if you should or shouldn't. I just want to avoid that risk of impaction as best that I can, so I don't use sand. I wouldn't recommend sand. Some people do it and they're just fine, and their geckos are just fine, but I'd rather not risk it, so I would recommend not doing it. Now, the next thing we're going to talk about is leopard gecko's diet. Now, they're not like bearded dragons, whereas bearded dragons need salads. Leopard geckos don't need salads whatsoever. They only eat insects. And basically, my go-to for feeding leopard geckos insects, I would say, is dubia roaches. Now, you can also get away with, and I supplement this with, crickets and mealworms, or the occasional superworm, depending on my leopard gecko is huge, so that's why I say that, because she has no issue eating a superworm. But I mean, some geckos are obviously too small for that. So when you feed them, you're only feeding them something that is as small as in between the space between their eyes. No bigger, because then they can choke. But if it's smaller than the length between their eyes, basically that means that they are able to swallow it and they shouldn't choke on it. Now, the exact amount of food that you feed them differs based on their age and based on their size. So I would highly recommend you research the exact specifics. I could probably sit here for 20 minutes and try to describe a different routine or feeding plan. I don't really have time for that, so definitely look up more research on what you're feeding, how often you're feeding, the size of your gecko, the age of your gecko. All of that stuff kind of matters, so we're not going to get into that in this video, but if you guys want to see something like that, let me know, and I might be able to do a video like that in the future for you guys. Now, one thing I've heard is some people feed their leopard geckos pinky mice. I would highly recommend never to feed your leopard gecko pinky mice. That is not good for them. I would not do that. That's kind of an old school thing that people have learned not to do anymore. So definitely do not feed your leopard gecko, in my opinion, pinky mice. Don't do it. Now, I wasn't going to tell you guys, like I said, the exact amount of food to feed, because it just, like I said, varies on what insect you're feeding, how old the gecko is, the size of the gecko, and things like that, and if they're breeding and whatnot. So basically, I'm not going to tell you that, but I will tell you how often you should be feeding, relative to what you're feeding. So basically, for babies, you want to feed them 5 to 6 days a week, and adults, you're only feeding 2 to 3 times a week. So it's basically every 3 to 4 days, give or take. That's how often you are going to feed your leopard gecko as an adult. Now, the last thing we're going to talk about with leopard geckos is supplements in their diet. So basically, there's 3 main things you should include. That's calcium, calcium with vitamin D3, and then a multivitamin. So that's what I use for mine. I would say for adults, you're going to be feeding them, since you're only feeding them 2 to 3 times a week, I would recommend doing calcium pretty much every single time. I would say that you would do the calcium with the D3 once a week or once every other week. So you're basically skipping a week, do it for feeding, and then you're gonna, skip a feeding or two. So it's every like third feeding. And then a multivitamin, I would average out to do it around once a week, give or take. Obesity is a huge problem in leopard geckos, so make sure you look up what a healthy weight is for a leopard gecko, and basically look up pictures of what a healthy leopard gecko looks like. That way you can tell if yours is overweight or not. Now, my girl Sunny, she's definitely overweight. She's got side boobs and everything. That's another sign that they're a little bit overweight, so make sure you look at these signs. That way it's way easier, honestly, to manage a leopard gecko's diet versus trying to have them on a specific diet to lose weight. It's not super easy for, especially mine specifically, to lose weight. So just make sure that you're feeding it accordingly and you know what a healthy one looks like. That way you can compare, and if yours is a little overweight, maybe cut back a little bit on how much you're feeding every time. Not necessarily how often you're feeding, just the amount you're feeding every single time. The best way to get your leopard gecko used to you and used to handling is basically taking them out of their tank and placing them on or near the ground, and then let them walk on and all over your hands. I would do this for 5 to 10 minutes a day for probably 3 to 4 days a week. Sooner or later, your gecko won't be as spazzy when you try to pick it up, and you'll be able to handle them a little bit more. Now, it's very important that you never grab your leopard gecko by the tail. If they lose it, yes, it will grow back, but it won't look the same, and losing their tail isn't the most pleasant process for them. So make sure that you're not grabbing them by the tail, and make sure that you're not scaring them or holding them high off the ground, because if they fall, they could get seriously hurt. Their temperament is very nice, honestly, I have to say. They can be kind of skittish, but if you work with them often and you're holding them often, they should be fine for you. I love Sunny. She's got the best personality. Every single time I go upstairs and I'm feeding geckos, she will run over to the corner of her tank and just sit there and watch me, because I've got a whole baby rack of crested geckos right next to her tank. So she knows that every single day and night I'm up there doing something with all the babies. So then she will just sit there and watch me. It's super cute. I love her to death. But they are kind of like dogs, honestly. I never really thought I would say that a leopard gecko is like a dog, but they're very, very similar. Now, I've been on a care guide kick like crazy the past probably 2 months. I did a crocodile gecko care guide, and I also just did a crested gecko care guide. And now with this leopard gecko care guide, that's 3 care guides in the last like 2 months. So if you guys are enjoying these, definitely let me know in the comments. I would appreciate it a lot hearing from you guys. If you guys are new to the channel, consider subscribing. I would really appreciate it. It helps the channel a ton when you guys view these videos, like these videos, comment on the video, share the video, all the things like that. If you're new, please subscribe. I'd love to have you. Thank you for watching today. If you're a returning subscriber, thank you guys for subscribing. I could not do it without you. I appreciate you guys. Thank you all for watching the video today, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace out.